Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. I'm honored to be here. I told Dan when I was walking up I wanted to strangle Bob Schieffer on Sunday. I was watching Face the Nation, and the program ended, and he looked at the camera and he said, now, you know, the members of Congress are taking off the day for President's Day, but they're taking a vacation for a week. And I wanted to reach through the TV and strangle him and say, have you seen my schedule this week? I am traveling all over the state with a smile on my face, because this is my favorite part of the job. To meet with all kinds of different groups, a number of different meetings with chambers of Congress. I've got Kansas City Chamber on Thursday morning. I've got the Columbia Chamber at a lunch after this. Did the School Board Association, doing a number of town halls, doing, frankly, what we need to do more often, and that is get out of Washington where everybody opens the doors for you and get back home and make sure that you are listening and learning about the problems on the ground that small businesses and education is facing in this state. So it's such a pleasure to be here. I'm going to try to speak for a very short period of time and take any questions that you have about my view as it relates to what's going on in Washington. I am proud that over the last 2 years we have cut over $500 billion in taxes in Washington, D.C. I'm proud of the fact that most of those have been focused on small businesses and working middle-class families. That figure does not include the taxes that the tax cuts that were renewed in December during the lame duck session, where we were able to finally provide some certainty to folks about what their not just tax rates, but a lot of the tax extenders, a lot of the tax incentives that we have in the tax code to promote business. I'm also glad that we are beginning to take a more serious look at some of the regulation and whether or not the regulation is hurting or helping in terms of our efforts to grow jobs. I am somebody who doesn't believe that we're going to get back to where we need to be through the growth of government payroll. I believe the only way we're going to get back to where we need to be is by making sure that the private sector is growing jobs. And there are people who say to me, well, business has $2 trillion on the sidelines, and why aren't you making them create jobs? And I said, well, that's not the way it works in America. That money will go into the marketplace and create jobs when the people who own that money believe that there is a good opportunity for investment. And that's when that money will go in. And so our job is to make sure that we are providing government services in an efficient and effective way, that we are providing some regulation, which is necessary. It's why people in America know that the products they use and the highways they drive and all of the other things are safer and more secure than many other countries in the world. It's one of the reasons why we're attractive to businesses, is because of the certainty that some regulation provides. But I'm the first to acknowledge, and the President has acknowledged, that some of those regulations go too far and create a stranglehold, and we need to make sure we do that. On to the budget. I am anxious for us to get in a room in a bipartisan way, have an honest intellectual discussion, and behave like adults as it relates to the budget. We will not do anything serious and substantial on the budget if we're only talking about discretionary domestic spending. If you understand the budget, if you understand the deficit, and most importantly, if you understand the debt, you know that the 18% of the budget that represents discretionary domestic spending, highways, education, all of the things that are not part of the defense budget and are not mandatory entitlements, we will never get to a path that we can be proud of in terms of our economic situation in this country. So the fact that we did all of the cuts in the House last week, essentially all of the cuts in only 18% of the budget, is not a good sign. Because we've got to, sometimes winning elections and solving hard problems are like oil and water. And we've got to figure out a way we get those two things out of the way, and that we kind of sit down and just try to solve the problem. Get the political footballs, if we can, to try to get them put away as much as possible. I am somewhat optimistic about what's going on in the Senate right now. you had Tom Coburn and Dick Durbin, a very liberal Democrat, way more liberal than I am, and Tom Coburn, a very conservative Republican, probably more conservative than I am, agree with the Fiscal Commission report that did a number of things that we're going to have to do. One of that is to reform the tax code. I bet everybody in this room has some part of the tax code they love. But what we're all going to have to do is realize that only about 25% of America even itemizes deductions. So the vast majority of that tax code is full of goodies, all kinds of different goodies. And if we could clean out a lot of those goodies, we could lower corporate tax rates and we could lower individual rates, even lower than where they are now. And by the way, our tax burden right now in America is the lowest it's been since 1950. So I think that cleaning up that tax code is part of the equation. Entitlements are part of the equation. And spending is part of the equation. And if we're not honest about that, we're never going to get where we need to go. So I think it's important that we do that. And I'm somebody who has, at times, in awkward ways, tried to drag my party kicking and screaming to the cutting table. For over a year, I've worked with Jeff Sessions on a spending cap. And we got every single Republican vote several times. And the most Democratic votes I could get were 16. So we were 2 votes short. But the good news is actually an old bull, an old appropriator in our caucus actually stood up in our caucus meeting a few weeks ago, and I about fell over because he says, you know, we should have done that Sessions-McCaskill thing. I'm going, oh my gosh, a light bulb has gone on. They're beginning to get this. So I think we are now, even some of the most liberal Democrats are willing to sit down and talk about cuts. But there's a huge group of us moderate Democrats that have been working. I filed a bill with Bob Corker capping spending at a percentage of the GDP on a 10-year glide path to get there. I'm working with Tom Coburn all the time. And so are some of the other Democrats. So I think we've got a good critical mass of a bipartisan effort to look at this problem honestly and move forward. If we don't get caught up in the politics of trying to use entitlement reform as a political 2x4, I think we can really make some real progress and do right by our grandchildren. And